The crash of solitude, the emergency klaxon screamed as Captain Elias Reed fought to maintain control of the rapidly descending survey vessel. Sweat beaded on his forehead, trickling down his temples as he gripped the manual override controls. Systems failing. Hull integrity at 27%, the ship's AI announced with infuriating calm. Recommend immediate evacuation. Elias gritted his teeth. No escape pods on a Class C scout, remember? We go down together, Arya. The uncharted planet Nerex filled the viewscreen, a swirling mass of teal oceans and forests that seemed to glow even from space. Beautiful if it wasn't about to become his tomb. Impact in 30 seconds, Arya intoned. It has been an honor serving with you, Captain Reed. Save the eulogy, Elias muttered, pulling back on the thrusters to slow their descent. We're not dead yet. The scout ship tore through the atmosphere, hull plates glowing red-hot from the friction. Elias aimed for a clearing within the strange, luminous forest below. The ship's frame groaned under the strain. Instruments flickering and dying around him. Impact came with a deafening crash. Elias was thrown against his restraints, pain exploding across his chest and left arm. Metal shrieked as the vessel carved a deep furrow through the alien soil before coming to rest at the edge of the forest. Silence fell, broken only by the hiss of ruptured cooling systems and the erratic spark of damaged circuitry. Elias hung limply in his harness, consciousness wavering. Blood trickled from a gash above his eye. With trembling fingers, he released the safety restraints and collapsed onto the tilted deck. Arya, he called. No response came from the ship's AI. The central computer core had taken the worst. Of the impact, alone. He was entirely alone. Pain lanced through his ribs as he dragged himself to the emergency kit. The handheld diagnostic scanner confirmed 3 broken ribs, a hairline fracture in his left radius, and a moderate concussion. Nothing immediately fatal, but serious enough on an unknown world with no medical support. Outside. The alien twilight bathed the landscape in ethereal blue light. Nerex's atmosphere was breathable according to the ship's readings before the crash. But Elias kept his filtration mask on as a precaution. Strange crystal formations dotted the landscape, catching and refracting the light of the planet's twin moons. The forest edge pulsed with gentle bioluminescence plants that seemed to breathe light. Elias secured the crash site as best he could with his injuries. Salvaging critical supplies? The ship's distress beacon was functional, but damaged broadcasting on a narrow band that might take months to reach the nearest outpost. Standard protocol, he reminded himself, voice rough in the alien silence. Secure shelter, water, assess surroundings. Night fell quickly on Nerex. The temperature dropped, and the forest's bioluminescence intensified, casting eerie shadows across the crash site. Elias retreated to the remains of his ship, sealing the emergency bulkhead against whatever might lurk in the alien darkness. Unable to maintain the effort of staying alert, he surrendered to his injuries and exhaustion. His last conscious thought was of Earth, of the family he had left behind to explore the stars. How ironic that his quest for connection across the universe would end in perfect isolation. Dreams came. Vivid and strange, filled with whispers he couldn't quite understand and sensations of warmth flowing through his broken body. In his delirium, he imagined gentle fingers tracing the lines of his face, a soft violet glow behind his eyelids. When consciousness returned, Elias realized 3 things simultaneously. First, sunlight was streaming through the shattered viewports he had survived the night. Second, the pain in his ribs and arm had subsided to a dull ache. And third, most alarmingly, he was not alone. A figure knelt beside his makeshift bed. Humanoid, but unmistakably alien, with skin the color of twilight amethyst that seemed to shimmer with its own inner light. Large, iridescent eyes studied him with unmistakable intelligence. Her features were delicate, almost ethereal, framed by what appeared to be tendrils that moved gently like underwater plants. Elias froze, afraid any sudden movement might provoke a hostile reaction. The alien tilted her head, then slowly raised her hand to her chest. "Lyra," she said, the word resonating not just in his ears but somehow within his mind as well. Her lips hadn't moved. A gentle pressure touched his consciousness, a request, not an invasion. Instinctively, he understood she was asking for his name. "Elias," he whispered, his voice hoarse. She smiled then, and something in his chest tightened. Her hands so human-like yet not reached toward his injured ribs. He should have recoiled, should have been afraid, but there was something in her presence that calmed his survival instincts. Her palm hovered over his injuries, emanating a subtle warmth that seeped into his skin. The pain receded further, replaced by a tingling sensation. "You heal me," he managed, the words feeling inadequate. Lyra's response wasn't in words, but in feelings that bloomed in his mind: concern, reassurance, curiosity. She was helping him, yes, but she was also fascinated by him as the alien sun climbed higher. Elias realized he had crashed into something far more significant than an uncharted world. He had crashed into a first contact scenario with a species that communicated through touch and emotion rather than words, and the representative of that species seemed determined to claim him as her responsibility. Touch of resonance. Days passed on Nerix as Elias slowly regained his strength under Lyra's care. She visited at dawn each morning, bringing strange fruits with flesh that glowed like embers and tasted of sunlight and spice. Communication remained challenging, a dance of gestures, emotions. In the occasional words she seemed to pluck directly from his mind, Elias learned that Lyra belonged to the Nerixians, a species evolved in symbiosis with their crystalline environment. The floating crystal formations he had seen were not merely geological curiosities, but living extensions of their collective consciousness. When she touched these crystals, they resonated with colors that shifted like aurora lights, a language Elias could observe but not comprehend. "Your people, ... Many?" Elias asked one evening. Struggling to form questions she would understand, Lyra placed her palm against a nearby crystal, which pulsed with rings of indigo and gold. Then she pressed her hand to his chest, allowing him to feel a sensation of community. Hundreds of minds connected like stars in a constellation. Distant, yet part of the same cosmic pattern. "Beautiful," he whispered. Overwhelmed by the glimpse into her world, she smiled, her violet features illuminated by the forest's bioluminescence. Her tendrils, which he now understood were sensory organs that detected emotional energies, weighed gently toward him. Responding to his genuine appreciation, as twilight descended, Lyra guided him deeper into the crystal forest for the first time. His injuries had healed enough for the journey, though he still moved with caution. The forest opened into a valley where massive crystal formations created natural archways and chambers, all pulsing with gentle light. "Your home?" Elias realized aloud. Lyra nodded, her eyes reflecting the surrounding luminescence. She led him to a reflecting pool at the center of the valley, its surface perfectly still, despite the gentle breeze that stirred the air plants growing nearby. Kneeling beside the pool, she invited him to join her with a gesture. When he settled beside her, she dipped her fingers into the water, causing ripples that seemed to carry light rather than merely reflect it. The ripples formed patterns. Elias understood she was attempting to communicate something important. She placed her hand over his, then guided his fingers to the water's surface. The moment he touched the pool, sensation flooded through him. Not just physical feeling, but emotional memories. Loneliness, the vast emptiness of space, the weight of his mission, the faces of those he'd left behind on Earth. Elias jerked back, startled by the intensity. "How did you?" Lyra's expression was one of compassion. She touched her chest, then his, then gestured to the pool. Somehow, the water had served as a conduit, allowing her to sense his deepest emotions, his buried loneliness, his drive to explore, his fear of forming attachments only to lose them. "You feel everything I feel," he said, understanding dawning. "That's how you communicate." She nodded, then hesitantly extended her hand, palm a pan. Invitation, not a demand. Elias hesitated only briefly before placing his hand in hers. The connection bloomed like a supernova in his mind. Lyra's consciousness touched his, not with words but with pure emotion and sensation. He experienced her curiosity about the stars, her responsibility to her people, her initial fear when she found him, and something else had growing warmth when she looked at him that mirrored his own confusing feelings. When they finally broke contact, Elias found himself breathless. Night had fallen completely, and the crystal forest glowed with increased intensity, responding to the emotional exchange they had shared. "I've never," he began. Unable to articulate the profundity of what had just occurred, Lyra's tendrils curled gently as she reached out, her fingertips brushing his cheek with exquisite tenderness. In that touch was a promise there was more to share, more to discover between them. She was offering him something humans spent lifetimes searching for: true understanding without the barrier of words. As they walked back toward his ship under the twin moons of Nerix, Lyra's hand occasionally brushed against his, each contact sending a cascade of shared sensation between them. The touches grew longer, more deliberate, neither of them acknowledging the boundary they were crossing between scientific curiosity and personal connection. That night, when Lyra prepared to leave him at his ship, as she had every previous evening, Elias found himself reaching for her hand. "Stay," he said simply. Her luminescent eyes studied his face, understanding the implications of his request. Slowly, she interlaced her fingers with his, the gesture, so human, yet carrying a depth of meaning no human touch ever could, inside the broken vessel that had brought him across the stars. Elias discovered a different kind of voyage as Lyra's consciousness merged with his through touch, her skin against his created bridges between their minds, allowing him to feel her joy, her wonder, her growing affection. Each caress was both physical and mental, in intimacy beyond anything he had experienced before. As the alien night deepened around them, Elias realized he was falling into something from which there might be no return, a connection that transcended species, language, and the cold vastness of space that had defined his life until now. Forbidden knowledge, the council chamber pulsed with agitated light, the crystalline walls reflecting the collective unease of the 9 Nerexian elders seated in a perfect circle. At the center stood Lyra, her violet skin luminous with emotion she made no attempt to conceal. "Your actions compromise everything," Elder Vex's thoughts resonated through the chamber. Translated by the living crystals into a frequency all could perceive, the human cannot be integrated into our collective. Their minds are too ... individual. "His name is Elias," Lyra responded, her tendrils rippling with defiance. "And you haven't even attempted to understand him." Elder Nara, the eldest female whose skin had faded to lavender with age, leaned forward. "We understand enough. You are to be guardian of the crystal heart. Your consciousness must remain untainted by foreign patterns." Lyra placed her hand on the central crystal pillar, projecting images of Elias's compassion when he encountered a wounded forest creature, his wonder at the crystal harmonies, his respect for their ways. "He carries wisdom our people could learn from, and chaos we cannot afford," countered Elder Vex. "We have observed his mind through you. He carries conflict, division, the isolation, sickness that plagues his species." The accusation stung because Lyra knew there was truth in it. Humans evolved without the shared consciousness that defined Nerexian society. They lived in perpetual emotional solitude, reaching for connections they could never fully achieve. It was what had drawn her to Elias's loneliness, called to something protective within her. "The law is absolute," Elder Nara concluded. "No guardian may form a deep bond with any being who cannot join the collective harmony. You must sever this connection before the awakening ceremony." The council's judgment rippled through the crystal network, becoming known to all Nerexians instantly. Lyra left the chamber with her tendrils pressed close to her body, a sign of emotional withdrawal recognized by all who saw her pass. Meanwhile, unaware of the council's decree, Elias worked diligently on repairing his ship's communication array. After nearly a month on Nerix, he had salvaged enough components to strengthen the distress signal. The work kept his hands busy while his mind remained preoccupied with Lyra and the deepening bond between them. Every night for the past week, she had come to him, and together they explored the boundaries between their species through touch. Each time the connection grew stronger, he could now sense her emotions, even when they weren't touching, a persistent warmth at the edges of his consciousness. As sunset approached, bringing the hour when Lyra usually appeared. Elias made a breakthrough with the transmitter. The signal strength jumped, extending far beyond the immediate star system. "Yes," he exclaimed, watching the readout climb. For the first time since the crash, rescue was a real possibility. The stellar survey corps detect the signal within days rather than months. His elation faltered as he realized what this meant. Rescue had been his goal, his duty as a captain. But now, Lyra arrived as these thoughts tumbled through his mind. She sensed his conflict immediately, her tendrils extending toward him in concern. "I fixed it," he explained, gesturing to the transmitter. "My people will come now." Understanding passed between them without words. Lyra's eyes dimmed slightly, but she placed her hand over his heart in what had become their ritual of connection. This time, however, when their consciousness began to merge, Elias sensed a barrier reluctance in her mind that hadn't existed before. He pulled back, studying her face. "What's wrong? What happened today?" Lyra hesitated, then guided him outside beneath the emerging stars. She pressed her palm to a nearby crystal formation, which illuminated with a complex pattern he had come to recognize as their formal language. Through their partial bond, he understood Fragment's counsel. Guardian. Forbidden. "They don't want you with me," he translated, the realization like ice in his veins. She nodded, her expression solemn. Then she showed him images of a massive crystal heart at the center of their territory, pulsing with the collective consciousness of all Neurixians. In the vision, she stood before it, her hands merging with its structure, becoming one with it. "You're important to your people," Elias whispered. "Some kind of leader." Lyra took his hands in hers, allowing him to feel the weight of her responsibility. The honor of her position, and the terrible choice now before her. To maintain their connection would mean abandoning her destiny, betraying her people's trust and traditions. To fulfill her role as guardian would mean closing herself to him forever. The realization settled between them like a physical presence. They were not merely two beings from different worlds, they were representatives of fundamentally different modes of existence. Humans cherished their individuality despite its isolation. Neurixians found meaning through their collective consciousness. That night, with the knowledge of both the approaching rescue ship and the Council's decree hanging over them, their touches carried a desperate intensity. Lyra guided Elias to a hidden crystal grotto where the natural formations created a chamber of perfect resonance. There, surrounded by light that responded to their every emotion, they allowed their connection to deepen beyond what either had thought possible. Skin against skin, mind against mind. They shared not just sensation, but memory, hope, and fear. Elias experienced Lyra's childhood, growing up connected to every member of her species, never knowing the human curse and blessing of privacy. Lyra felt the bittersweet joy of human individuality, the sharp pleasure of personal achievement, the ache of never being fully known. As dawn approached, they lay entwined beneath crystals that pulsed with the rhythm of their shared heartbeats. Neither spoke of the choice that loomed before them, her duty versus their bond, his rescue versus exile on an alien world instead. Lyra placed her hand over his heart and shared one simple truth that required no translation, whatever they decided. Neither would ever experience connection the same way again. They had changed each other irrevocably, creating something that existed neither in human isolation nor Neurixian harmony, but somewhere in the beautiful, painful space between. Echo of Worlds, the rescue ship Artemis appeared in Nerix's orbit exactly as Elias had calculated 7 days after his strengthened distress signal began broadcasting. From the hillside overlooking his crash site, he watched the distant flare of its descent thrusters as it prepared to dispatch a recovery shuttle. "They're here," he said, his voice hollow even to his own ears. Beside him, Lyra's skin had dimmed to a muted violet, her tendrils nearly still a sign he now recognized as deep emotional distress. In the week since the Council's decree, they had existed in a fragile bubble of borrowed time, both aware of its inevitable collapse, but unwilling to surrender a moment of their remaining days. Together, Elias had spent those days introducing Lyra to human, customs teaching her to communicate with simple hand gestures, showing her how to write her name in Earth Standard, telling her stories of his homeworld. In return, she had taken him deeper into the crystal forests, revealing sacred places where generations of Nereixians had contributed their consciousness to the living memory of their species. "Captain Reed, do you copy?" The voice from his repaired communicator startled them both. "This is Commander Salazar of the Artemis. We've locked onto your position and are initiating recovery." Elias hesitated, then lifted the device. "Copy, Artemis. Captain Reed here. I'm not alone." Pause. "Please clarify, Captain. Our scans show no human life signs besides yours. I've made contact with an indigenous species. Peaceful, advanced. They saved my life." He glanced at Lyra, whose luminescent eyes watched him with unreadable emotion. "Request scientific team for first contact protocols." The response was immediate and predictable. "Negative, Captain. Quarantine procedures are in effect. Prepare for immediate extraction. First contact assessment teams will follow after your decontamination and debriefing." "They fear what they don't understand," Elias explained to Lyra. Though he knew she had sensed the meaning through their connection, she placed her hand against a nearby crystal, which flared with a complex pattern of light. Through their bond, Elias felt her resignation, her acceptance. The Council had been clear with the arrival of humans, all Nereixians would retreat to the inner sanctum. Contact would be managed through formal channels after Lyra's awakening ceremony. "When?" he asked, his throat tight. In response, she touched her palm to his, sharing a vision of Nerix's twin moons aligning directly overhead tonight. The awakening ceremony would occur during the rare convergence, and she would take her place as guardian, her individual consciousness merging more completely with the collective than ever before. "I don't want to leave," he admitted, the words inadequate for the storm of emotions behind them. Lyra's tendrils reached out, gently brushing against his face in the caress that had become precious to him. Through that touch flowed her understanding, her own conflict, something deeper in emotion that transcended their different biologies. Not quite love as humans understood it, but a recognition of essential connection that made separation unthinkable. "Captain Reed, shuttle deployment in 30 minutes. Prepare for extraction." The communicator's harsh intrusion shattered the moment. Elias made his decision then, reaching for the device with sudden determination. "Artemis requesting delay of extraction until tomorrow morning. Need to secure critical research data." Pause then. "Granted, Captain." "Extraction at 0800 tomorrow? Be advised, this is final extension." As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, Elias followed Lyra through the crystal forest one last time. They moved in silence, their linked hands communicating more than words ever could. The path led them to the heart of Nereixian territoria, massive cavern where the largest crystal formation on the planet pulsed with the living consciousness of their collective memory. The gathering had already begun. Hundreds of Nereixians stood in concentric circles around the crystal heart, their skin illuminated with patterns that seemed to flow between them like currents of light. At their approach, a path opened silently, leading directly to the central dais, where the Council of Elders waited. Elder Nara stepped forward, her ancient eyes meeting Elias's without hostility, but with unmistakable firmness. "You should not be here, Star Traveler." "I won't interfere," Elias replied, knowing the crystals would translate his meaning if not his exact words. "I only asked to witness." The elder's tendrils rippled with surprise. "To witness is to participate in our way. Your consciousness will be sensed by all." "I understand," he said, though in truth, he couldn't possibly comprehend what was about to happen. Lyra squeezed his hand once before releasing it and stepping onto the dais. As she approached the crystal heart, her body began to illuminate from within, patterns of light flowing across her violet skin in hypnotic sequences. The assembled Nereixians responded, their own bodies synchronizing to her rhythm. The ceremony began without announcement, the collective consciousness of the Nereixians flowing toward Lyra like tributaries joining a river. Through their lingering connection, Elias felt echoes of the experience, hundreds of minds touching hers, memories spanning generations flowing through her consciousness. wisdom and responsibility settling onto her like a mantle, as the twin moons reached their alignment overhead. Their combined light filtered through the crystal ceiling of the cavern, creating a perfect beam that struck the crystal heart. The massive formation pulsed once, twice, then opened like a flower, revealing a smaller crystal of intense brilliance at its core. Lyra extended her hands toward this inner crystal, her fingers mere centimeters from its surface. At that moment, her consciousness brushed against Ilias's one final time, conveying a single, devastating truth. Once she touched the crystal, their connection would be severed forever. The Guardian's mind belonged to all Nereixians. There could be no special bond with an outsider. Elder Nara's voice resonated through the chamber. "Approach and claim your destiny, Guardian." Lyra's hands trembled, suspended in that moment of choice. Her luminescent eyes found Elias across the chamber, and in them, he saw something that transcended species doubt, yearning, the universal fear of losing something precious. Without conscious thought, Elias stepped forward. Wait, the collective shock rippled through the chamber like a physical wave. No outsider had ever interrupted the awakening ceremony in all of Nereixian history. "I choose her," he declared, his voice echoing against the crystal walls. "And if she chooses me, I will stay. I will learn your ways. I will respect your customs." He looked directly at Elder Nara. "But I ask that she be allowed to maintain our connection." The elder's tendrils writhed with what might have been outrage or merely astonishment. "Impossible. The Guardian must belong to all equally." Then perhaps came a voice from the edge of the gathering. "She is not meant to be Guardian." Elder Vex pushed through the crowd, his expression severe. "This human speaks of choice, a concept alien to our harmony." Yet Lyra's hesitation proves she has already been influenced by his kind. The connection is tainted. The accusation hung in the air like a thundercloud. Lyra's skin flared with sudden intensity, her tendrils extending fully in a display of emotion Elias had never witnessed from her. "My connection to him does not diminish my commitment to our people," she said, her thoughts resonating through the crystal network for all to experience. "Perhaps it is time for the Guardian to understand both unity and individuality, to bridge worlds rather than remain isolated in our own perfection." The crystal heart pulsed erratically, reflecting the discord spreading through the collective. Elder Nara raised her hands, calling for silence. "This is unprecedented," she acknowledged, "but perhaps it was inevitable. The universe grows smaller. Other species will find us, as this one has." Her ancient eyes studied Elias with renewed interest. "What exactly do you propose, Star Traveler?" Before Elias could respond, his communicator crackled to life. "Captain Reed, be advised, approach vector locked for dawn extraction. All personnel must be on board." Time was running out. His people were coming for him, expecting him to return to the stars, to civilization, to the life he had known. But that life now seemed hollow compared to what he had found on Nerex, not just Lyra, but a new understanding of connection itself. As the twin moons began their slow separation overhead, Elias made the most important decision of his life, one that would echo across two worlds. Beyond the stars, dawn broke over the crystal forests of Nerex, painting the landscape in shades of amber and rose. The extraction shuttle from the Artemis hovered above the clearing where Elias's ship had crashed months earlier. Its landing gear extended, waiting. Inside the remains of his vessel, Elias recorded his final log entry. "Captain's log supplemental. By the time this message reaches Earth, I will have been declared missing in action, presumed dead. The truth is more complicated." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I've encountered a species whose understanding of consciousness and connection exceeds our own in ways I'm still struggling to comprehend. They call themselves the Nereixians, and I have chosen to remain among them not as an observer or diplomat, but as a participant in their society." He glanced out the viewport at the shuttle, knowing Commander Salazar would soon lose patience. "I am leaving detailed notes on Nereixian biology, culture, and the remarkable crystal technology that facilitates their shared consciousness. Believe peaceful contact is possible, but it must proceed with absolute respect for their cognitive sovereignty." Elias fingered the small crystal fragment hanging from a cord around his neck, Lara's gift from the previous night. One final note. Despite our physiological differences, there exists a compatibility between human and Nyrixian consciousness that defies scientific explanation. I intend to explore this frontier personally. Captain Elias Reed signing off. He terminated the recording and sealed it with his command codes, ensuring it would reach Stellar Survey Corps headquarters. Then he gathered the research samples. He had prepared for the extraction team enough to occupy Earth's xenobiologists for years without revealing the most sacred aspects of Nyrixian biology. Outside, Commander Salazar waited at the shuttle ramp, her expression shifting from relief to confusion as she saw Elias approach alone with only a small container of samples. Captain Reed? We detected multiple life forms in your vicinity last night. Where is the indigenous contact? Safe, Elias replied. And remaining that way is my primary concern. He handed her the container and data crystal. Everything Earth needs to know is here. The rest requires time and cultural exchange protocols. Salazar's eyes narrowed. Your extraction orders are non-negotiable, Captain, I'm aware. Elias straightened, meeting her gaze directly. Which is why I'm officially requesting asylum on Nerix, effective immediately. I renounce my commission in the Stellar Survey Corps and choose to remain as the first human liaison to the Nyrixian people. The commander's shock was evident. That's not possible. Quarantine protocols apply to Earth, not to me, Elias finished. Check the regs, Commander. Section 17, Paragraph 9. In cases of established non-hostile contact, personnel may petition for extended integration study. I'm petitioning. Salazar's hand moved toward her sidearm, then stopped. This is because of one of them, isn't it? The female our sensors detected with you. Elias touched the crystal at his throat. It's because of all of them, and what they can teach us. What they've already taught me. After a tense standoff, Salazar reluctantly accepted the samples and data. Headquarters won't like this. They'll probably send a retrieval team. Tell them I'll be waiting, ready to serve as intermediary, Elias said. But also tell them this. The Nyrixians have abilities we can barely comprehend. Forced extraction would be unwise. As the shuttle lifted off, carrying his message back to Earth, Elias felt a familiar presence behind him. Lyra emerged from the crystal forest, her violet skin radiant in the morning light. Around her neck hung a crystal identical to his own, the paired fragments from the crystal heart that Elder Nara had granted them in an unprecedented decision that had changed Nyrixian society forever. They're gone, he said, turning to her. Lyra nodded, her tendrils swaying gently. She placed her hand over the crystal at her throat, then touched his. Immediately, their connection blossomed between them, stronger than ever before, the crystals acting as permanent conduits between their minds. The Council's compromise had surprised them both. Lyra would not become guardian in the traditional sense, but instead would pioneer a new role ambassador to the stars, with Elias as her human counterpart. Together, they would prepare both societies for the inevitable wider contact to come. It won't be easy, Elias said, sensing her thoughts. Both our peoples fear what they don't understand. Lyra's response flowed through their connection, not in words, but in certainty. What they had built between them, this bridge between individual and collective consciousness, was worth preserving, worth fighting for. It represented a third path, neither human nor Nyrixian, but something new. As they walked hand in hand toward the Nyrixian settlement that would now be Elias's home, the crystal fragments at their throats pulsed in perfect synchronization. Through their bond, Elias sensed the approach of other Nyrixians. Curious about the human who had chosen their world over his own, some, like Elder Vex, still harbored doubts. Others, particularly the younger generation, were eager to experience this new form of connection, one that preserved individuality while allowing for deep communion of mind and spirit. Lyra stopped at the edge of the settlement, taking both his hands in hers. Through their touch came her question. Was he certain of his choice? Did he understand what he was giving up? Leah smiled, letting her feel the depth of his conviction. I crashed on this planet alone, certain I would die in isolation, he said aloud, knowing she would sense the meaning beyond his words. Instead, I found a connection I never knew was possible. I'm not losing Earth, I'm gaining the stars. The twin sons of Nerix climbed higher, casting their light across the crystal spires of the settlement. As Elias and Lyra entered together, the crystals around them resonated with new harmonies, neither purely Nerixian nor human, but a complex chord that spoke of possibilities yet unexplored. In the vastness of space, a small survey ship departed the atmosphere, carrying news of first contact back to Earth, and on the surface below. In the warm embrace of alien arms, a lone human had found what his species had sought since first looking. Up at the stars, proof that across the universe, connection was the one true constant, transcending biology, culture, and even the cold equations of space and time. In their shared consciousness, simple truth echoed between them. They had each fallen asleep alone beneath alien skies, awakened to a bond that would outlast the stars themselves.